What's up, everybody? Cinephile Mike is here, and I have the pleasure to sit down with the director and producer of Long Live the State, the documentary dedicated to the great cult classic from MTV in the 90s. I am here with Matthew Perniciaro. Matthew, how you doing today?
Hey, Mike, thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for taking the time. So let's just dive right into it.
Let's
When
do
and
it.
how were you first introduced to the state?
So the state premiered my freshman year of high school. And I'm originally from Long Island, New York, but I was living, my family had moved to North Carolina. And like North Carolina in the 90s, like I have a lot of nostalgia for it now, but like at the time, it was like very Southern and very traditional. And I was this kind of kid from the North. So I didn't really like always feel like I fit in. Like I didn't always like feel like I had like got a I had amazing friends from growing up, but like I didn't always feel like I fit in at this, the school I went to and stuff like that. And when I saw the state, I was like, oh my God, like it's okay to be like a little bit different and weird and like completely like unapologetic and like seeing how fearless they were about that. I had never seen anything like it before. So I was, 13, 14 years old, whatever it was, like, and it just blew my mind. And I was like, so I became an immediate fan. I would tape the episodes on VHS so I could watch them throughout the week. And then,
Jesus.
yeah, I mean, that was the best, right? Like you
Yep.
always like just recorded everything that you loved. Um, and what happened was I ended up actually meeting friends because like we would talk about it at school and be like, "Oh, did you see that thing?" And the people who saw it and like got it and were like, I was like, okay, like, and we would like nerd out over it. And I was like, oh, these are my people. These are my people. And like my buddy Chris Drummond, like I talked to him about him a couple times. Like he and I like were diehard fans. Like we would watch it together, we would tape it. Um, and when we filmed the live shows, I was like, dude, you got to fly out and be like our production assistant. So he's like lugging cases and stuff, but he didn't care. He was like, I can't believe we're here. Like, what's going on right now? This is insane. So yeah, so I've been
So
a fan for literally over 30 years.
a kindred spirit. Um, so you have quite an extensive producing resume, and this was your first directing feature, like directing of a feature film. What made you say, like, I have to direct this? Like, this has to be like my stamp.
Yeah, I mean, so right before COVID, I started transitioning into directing more. I'm still producing, but I felt confident enough in my filmmaking. I went to NYU. Excuse me. Both Carrie and I got the flu at Tribeca, so we
Oh,
uh I'm still on the tail end of recovering. But basically I'd moved to LA originally. I went to NYU because I wanted to be a director. I moved to LA because I wanted to be a director. And I was writing and I kind of fell in love with producing. Like I fell in love with like I wrote the first couple films that I produced and I just fell in love with producing. Like I just fell in love with that side of filmmaking and that I did it for almost 20 years. You know what I mean? That was the predominant thing that I would do. I would direct a lot of short form documentary content. I produce a lot of things for Marvel. And the first piece that I had done for Marvel was this kind of series of shorts about the Black Panther, featuring Ta-Nehisi Coates because he was writing the issues at that time. So I
right.
went to Paris and interviewed Ta-Nehisi and was crafting these kind of monthly episodes. And that was when I was like, okay, I want to really start committing to directing more. Um, I have actually directed a couple features. One of them will never come out. I can't say what it is. It's not
Fair.
my choice that it won't come out. It was a thing I got hired to do,
Okay.
and the artist that it's about, they just ultimately decided they weren't going to put the movie out. It had nothing to do with the movie itself, just
Happens.
disagreements between, the company and the individual. And then the other film that I directed, I finished kind of shortly before I actually started Long Live the State, and we just haven't taken it out to the world yet. So,
Okay.
um, which was another passion project, a film called Tracers. But this I'm so proud that this is my first like
Hmm.
feature directing, because I've done a couple of like series and things like that for streaming
Right.
as a director, but like this I'm so proud, like it's so perfect that this is the first feature that came out to the world. Like I love the other work that I've done, but the
Hmm.
fact that this is the first one
Yeah.
is really special to me because you know the state were also like a big like part of my choice to kind of want to continue this path. Like I feel like I mean I knew I wanted to work in film since I was a kid. Like my mom's joke is that for third grade in Halloween, I mean she was like, "What do you want to be? Like a cowboy or what do you want to be?" And I was like, "I want to be Steven Spielberg." So like she made me a Steven Spielberg costume with like a beard and like sticks and like you know so like it's always been in my like DNA. It's
Right.
to work in film. But there were times where it's like, oh well, maybe I don't want to do that. And then I would see the state and I'd be like, oh no, no, that's what I want to do. And they went to NYU. Okay, I'm gonna go to NYU.
Wow.
Remember even when I got to NYU, like when I first got to NYU, like there was a lot of pressure, I think, when you're a kid. And we talk about it like Showalter talks about it in the film, like he didn't know what he wanted to do when he got to NYU.
Yeah.
And I was a little similar where I wasn't in Tisch, right? I was in doing more of kind of a create your own major general
Mhm.
studies in my first year. Um, and I questioned, and then I saw Boogie Nights, and I was like,
Mm.
oh no, I'm gonna go do that. So like the state got me to NYU, and then when I
Right.
heard that Paul Thomas Anderson had dropped out of NYU, I was like, I'm gonna do that too. So I dropped out of NYU after a year and
Got my
moved
pass.
yeah, and then moved to California and just started working on film sets, and the rest is history. Yeah.
So, how did you go about approaching this project? So, I'm assuming it probably cooked up somewhere when they were doing the stage shows during the writer strike. So, how did you like approach putting this together? How did you approach the state? And, was everyone on board from the get-go or
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty cool. I mean, like I actually had this idea to do a documentary of the state like ye many years ago. I was like, why has no one done a documentary about the state? And like occasionally I'd like bump into them or bump into someone like 1 degree of separation. My good friend Jordana is business partners with Michael Showalter. I like bumped into her at like a premiere and I was like, I want to talk to you guys. Like, we should do a documentary with the state. And she's like, Showalter's never gonna do it. Like, you know what I mean? Like, she's like, he's never gonna do it. So then I would get like deterred, but then I'd be like, man, I gotta get back to that. I gotta like find a way in. I gotta find, and I knew Joe Latrulio because Joe had acted in a film I produced like 20 years ago, called Fanboys.
that's
And
right. I'm a fan of that film as well.
yeah, that well, fun story. I'll tell you later about that one. But yeah, but basically, so I reached out to Joe when I saw they were doing the tour. I was like, okay, like this is it. Like this is the moment. If I'm ever gonna like get after it and like take my shot to try to make this happen, this is the time. And I was going to see the show in LA when it was here. And I just emailed Joe and I was like, look, man, this is what I've been up to. I'd love to talk to you guys about this. I don't know if you've ever where your heads would be at on it. And he emailed me back like the next day and was like, your timing couldn't be better because like someone else actually approached us recently as well about doing a documentary. And we have a Zoom with them next week. Could you Zoom next week as well? And I was like, 100%, like count me in. Um, So I Zoomed with members of the group. Not everyone was on there, but they, excuse me, still getting over the flu. Um,
All good.
they, um, they basically, uh, they recorded it so the rest of the group could watch it. And I don't know the particulars. I don't know who the other filmmaker was, but I guess they recorded like both Zooms for those who couldn't be there.
Mhm.
Everyone watched it, and then about a week after that, Joe called me back and was like, "Hey, man, we want to go with you."
Nice.
And so they were doing a live stage show like a week after this, like November 2023. And he's like, "We're gonna go up to Seattle and do the show. Do you want to film that?" And I was just like, you know what?
Mhm.
Like that feels too rushed. Like I want to like kind of like because I like to like get to know people a little bit. I like to kind of
Right.
like build relationships. I think
Hmm.
it's so weird. And I mean, sometimes in documentary, you're not afforded that opportunity. You just have to start
Yeah.
filming. But in this instance, knowing that in April they had already planned to do two shows, I
Okay.
was like, okay, let's focus on filming that. And then I was like, I'll use this period of time to really get all the archives sorted out, educate
Hmm.
myself, to know everybody. But I also didn't want to film anyone's interviews until we had started filming the other stuff first, because I
Right.
wanted cameras around a little bit before interviews were conducted. So Kevin's interview, everyone for the most part lived in Los Angeles, um, or was going to be in Los Angeles. Black doesn't live in LA, but he was going to be here. And
Right.
Kevin lives in New York. Todd lives in Korea, so that came much later. But like um, knowing that, so we did Kevin's interview while we were on the road filming. We
Hmm.
did filmed one performance in Nashville and then a
Okay.
performance in Austin over
Nice.
the course of a week. They performed them both shows over the course of a week.
So when you were putting this all together, and I actually really appreciated you did like a non-linear format, right? Because it could have been very like, here's where they go to NYU, here's where they form the state, this is where it goes, and this is where they're next. I appreciated the non-linear approach that you took.
Thank you.
Kind of like a little bit of the stage show, a little bit of history, and you interspersed the talking head interviews throughout. How did you come to that format versus something that was more traditional? And
Yeah.
talk about the design concept, because I love the TV aspect when we were watching
Yeah.
the clips.
Yeah, thank
How'd
you.
you put the puzzle together?
Yeah, absolutely. So basically, um, the figuring out the structure of the film took a bit, right? Because my initial kind of thought process on it was I wanted it to be kind of like Nashville, right? Or like kind of almost like a concert film.
Hmm.
Oh, I think you're a Billy Joel fan. So Last Play at Shea, which is a
Hmm.
great documentary all about, you know, and I think it's probably one of the best structured documentaries. It's kind of a nonlinear, or I should say this, it's intersecting linear stories
Hmm.
intercut with a Billy Joel concert, which being the last event that takes place at Shea Stadium,
Right.
intercut with a Billy Joel biopic, intercut with the history of the New York Mets. And I remember watching that documentary, and it came out like 17 years ago, something like
Hmm.
that, probably 17, 18 years ago. But I remember watching that structure going, that's it, really a brilliant, beautiful structure for a film because you're intertwining all these things, but you're giving me three experiences.
Hmm.
So I've always loved playing with structure. I've always loved like, how do we deliver things in a unique way? So for this project, my original structure was kind of more like Nashville. I was like, okay, it'll be like stage history, backstory, stage, and I was
Right.
going to constantly cut back to the live performances throughout. Um, when I laid it out that way, it was great. Like it was great because the live performances are great, but there was something about the momentum of it that didn't feel I didn't connect emotionally with it as much as I wanted to. It felt like when you went to those live shows, it took you out of the emotion. And I
Right.
also felt like with 11 backstories, and it was very
Hmm.
important to me that I wanted everyone to have their own backstory. I wanted
Yeah.
everyone to have their own moment. Um, from people who have been constantly in front of a camera, like Ken or Joe or Tom Lennon, people who we've seen every single year, multiple times a year, to
Hmm.
someone like, Kevin, who has obviously an amazing podcast career now,
Right.
or like Todd, who ended up becoming a multimedia artist and a
Hmm.
professor, who you haven't seen on camera as frequently.
Right.
I wanted everyone in this group to be given equal time and their moment. Um, Once I realized it was like you had the history and you had all these intersecting backstories,
Hmm.
enough. You didn't want to take yourself out of the emotion of that journey. So the
Right.
linear story, the A story of the film is kind of a linear story, right? The A story is this, they meet at NYU here and we go all the way to 2023.
Hmm.
But it's dipping into these personal backstories all the way throughout. And I tried to find moments in that A linear story where it
Hmm.
felt natural to go into that person's backstory. You know, a great example I always think of is Kevin. When the group ultimately breaks up, it really affected Kevin very deeply. And he told me this beautiful story during his interview about like, kind of feeling this need to almost like disconnect from that experience to
Hmm.
process it. And I was like, okay, that moment in the linear story is the perfect moment to go into Kevin's backstory. So I tried to
Right.
find those kind of touch points where it really felt natural to make those jumps,
Hmm.
but also do so in a manner that didn't just feel like, oh, this is A to Z, cradle to grave, you know what I mean? Linear storytelling.
No, and it worked. And I had to say, I was what impressed me because I was like, I saw that the film is about, it's just under 2 hours. And I'm like, there's 11 people in this. I'm like, are we really going to get to hear all? Are we going to hear from a few that, like you said, are more prominent, that, are more public facing? So the fact that you were able to get all of them 11 and balanced, I mean, my hat is off to you, sir.
Thank you very much. Yeah, no, I mean, look, it's probably the most, or the highest number of backstories it's definitely the highest number I've ever dealt with in one film. It's
Right.
probably, I think, the most I ever will contend with in one film. Um, but it's something that's a structure that we had also tried on the first documentary I ever made, which was called More Than a Game, that I had produced, where we had linear storylines, but then also kind of dipping into these backstories. And I hadn't gone back to something in that structure for a
Mhm.
while, but I really believed that it would work well with this, and I'm very, very proud of how it did.
How'd you come up with the idea for framing the
Oh,
like the actual cuts with that little TV, which really sent me.
oh, thank you. Yeah, I think, you can do a lot in the post process now to kind of up-res
Mhm.
vintage footage. Sometimes I think that feels very natural.
Mhm.
Sometimes I think it feels a little fake. You know what I mean? Sorry, there's a siren going by. I don't know if you can hear that, but
Nope.
near a firehouse, so that's always fun in Los Angeles. But basically, yeah, like instead of just kind of black barring the sides and having that 4:3 frame, I always try to find something that's a little bit visually different. It's something
Mhm.
that I've done in my past work as well, and specifically with vintage footage, I'm like, oh, let's throw it on an old, bubble television, let's throw it on an old tube television. And like that, what's interesting for this film, and I wanted to do more of them, I just ran out of time. So like I'm probably gonna go film a few more of them.
Nice.
Um, but like the little thing that I think I told the cast this at the screening, but I don't think I've ever said it publicly yet. That's actually a recreation of my bedroom.
Ah.
And the other television you see is a recreation of um my the TV room at my dad's house when I was growing up. So the idea for me was like it was this kind of little personal touch, right? One, like
Mhm.
it was this little fun thing. I was like, oh, I can production design out like a version of what my teenage bedroom was, but also
Mhm.
at the same time, like I like the concept of an audience feeling like, oh, I'm taking you back to watching it in the 90s. You're not just gonna
Right.
see, oh, you're just seeing like another version of how you've seen all 4:3 vintage footage in every other documentary. Like I wanted to
Yeah.
put people in a setting that felt like you were there. And that's what I want to do with some of the other footage. I just haven't.
Worked.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah,
Worked.
like when you get into like Reno and Wet Hot, I want to like do some 2000s televisions and stuff like
Right.
that. You know, I just didn't get a chance to get there yet.
So one of the fascinating things, and you brought up, Reno 911, Wet Hot American Summer. I don't think people realize the amount of projects that have come out of the state because the state was such a, even though it was on for about 4 years, right? Like they only had a few episodes each season
Yeah.
and it went so under the radar. I don't think people realize the impact that it had on the other projects that we've had.
Oh yeah, I mean like, and I think that was also such a big part of the story for me was that it was, I think a lot of people like maybe know a member or these members. Oh, I know that person from that thing and that person from that thing. But
Yeah.
even like their writing work and their directing work, like, like I don't think a lot of people connect all those dots. And that's
Yeah.
where I was like, and then you take it to that kind of next level where it's like, and then who did they inspire that went and did this thing and that thing and this thing and that thing? And it was like, that to me was like also not only really fun to kind of
Yeah.
like put that giant web together of like, look, and then they did this, and then they did this, and then
Yeah.
they did this, and then this person went and did that and that and that. But also like it was necessary because I think
Yeah.
part of what the film says to the world is if this group of friends didn't meet at NYU in 1988 and go form this little group of sketch comedy group, and then I mean, there's so many things that went just like right, but it's also a testament to them as human beings, like just doing. Like there's people in the world who are just doers, and this group
Yeah.
are just doers. And but if that didn't happen, or if they had broken up, or if they had let the pressures kind of get to them, like
Yeah.
all these other things may never have happened.
Yeah.
And like that was a really important part of telling this story was
Yeah.
that it's not just it's and I've said this in the past, but that even kind of was built in the title. Like there's the State, the TV show that aired in the mid 90s on MTV. But then there's this group of people who are the state. And that's why
Right.
it is like long live the state, because that life that they
Yeah.
have shared and created with one another is far longer than that little period on MTV.
Yeah. No, it's such a wonderful film. So now that you've completed this project and you talked about your other film Tracers, I love to ask this question anytime I get a chance to interview a director. And this is probably the educator in me, and for
Yeah.
anyone that catches this, what would you say as a director is the biggest lesson you take from you that you're like, you know what? This is something that I need to do every time I make a film. And what would you say is one of the greatest lessons you've learned? Like, you know what? Did that, didn't work. Got to avoid that.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me is always just making sure that you know the story you want to tell. Because look, even when you're doing something independently, which is what the majority of the films I've made in my lifetime have been made independently, and you don't have a big budget to work with, that actually that actually hurts you more than it helps you
Mhm.
because you really have a very finite amount of money. And like, even if you're kind of really cutting stuff down to the bare bones on an indie film, like you still have to pay an editor. You still have to pay your
Yep.
crew. You still have to pay, you know what I mean? Like there's just hard costs to making a movie. So you really have to know what your story is going in. So that's something that like, I think when I first started, and I think a lot of documentary is like this, is,
Mhm.
documentary, you write it in the editing room.
Mhm.
And, you know, because you just go out and film a bunch of stuff and you have ideas and you have questions that you want to ask people and you have kind of like loose structure ideas of how you think this thing will go. But the reality is like those plans can go out the window real quick because you're filming real life and you have no idea
Yep.
what's going to happen. And whatever you film is going to influence and change everything you therefore do. But so I think that's one piece of it is really knowing like once you in between that filming period and that editorial period, like get your story down, really write out like a detailed outline. And that's something that I probably didn't do at first, but now I do very
Mhm.
specifically, especially when you are kind of working with non-traditional structures.
Mhm.
because, even if like you do, like we did, I mean, we pivoted that big structure change like 6 weeks ago. Like it wasn't like something, but I knew where all the pieces were meant to exist. So it was very
Right.
easy to just, hey, let's take that piece out and then see how these two pieces fit together.
Mhm.
Um, I think the things that I mean, I learn so much every time I make a new movie or every time whether that's been producing, directing. I, I guess what I would just say is expect the unexpected. Like, because, and you have to kind of, as a documentary filmmaker, give yourself to the process, right?
Mhm.
Like, I, I had like originally I was like, oh, I'm gonna have this film finished by the end of last year and this, and then obviously like then this thing changed and this person wasn't available for an interview for another 4 months and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I it worked out perfectly. When I called Tribeca, I was like, I've had a number of films there in the past, and I've gotten to know the programmers. And I called Kara Kuzumano, who, is the head of the festival.
Mhm.
And I said, Kara, like, I'm about to send you the roughest thing I've ever sent any human being in my entire life. But I promise you, like, if you let it in, I'll get it done in time. And then like 24 hours later, she's like, I love this. It's in, like, get to work. Um, I
Good
guess
motivator.
yeah, and we hustled and we got it done. I mean, it's not. There's still little, like I said, there's little things that I want to do. There's
Mhm.
like I was like watching the movie in the theater, and I was like, oh man, I just came up with the greatest idea for a transition. I mean, my running joke that I did, I that I also I've said in the past is like I kind of ascribe to the George Lucas School of Filmmaking, where
Right.
like I will fix and tinker and change and do like until they kind of like rip it from my hands until it's like you cannot change it. It's on the streaming service or it's like on. I will literally like do every little bits and pieces until I have to push the delivery button. But but yeah, I mean, so um another lesson that I learned is do not trust AI. It's not there.
Ah.
It's not there yet. Um, because we were finishing the edit literally up in days until the festival,
Mhm.
uh, we were like, okay, well, maybe how can we use some of these newer AI tools, knowing like we weren't going to be able to properly do a full sound mix at this time, knowing that weren't
Right.
going to properly color correct everything fully this time. So we used some AI tools, I don't know, about 2 weeks before we had to deliver, and it completely ripped the movie apart. Like
Wow.
completely ripped the movie apart. Like
Huh.
literally, it would be like Carrie talking, but like Ben Garant's voice, like on like it, like and like a piece of an interview of Ben from that's not even in the film. And I was like, oh no, oh no. So we had to
Oh
actually
boy.
spend like 2 weeks or like at least like a week, like stitching the movie back together. Yeah, it was wild. It was wild. So AI cannot be trusted, at least not yet.
There you go. So before we get into some fun state specific questions, what are you hoping people take away? Like when they sit and watch this project on its next, like what are you hoping people take away from it?
Yeah, I mean, I think what I really want people to take away from it is that there is, let me think about the best way to phrase this, but don't be afraid to create the way you want to create
Okay.
and find the people
Mhm.
that want to do the same thing because you will support, help, inspire, and drive one another to that place. And, we talk about finding your people and that the fact that this group is a family, right? They're a chosen family. And I think that's one thing that was very important to me in making this film is that letting that message kind of ring true. Um, and also like, look, for people who've never heard of the state, I hope this can be like an amazing, like introduction that allows them to go discover and do a much deeper dive. In an hour and 45 minutes, like I can't show a fraction of the genius that these people have created. So like I'm just hoping that, you know, I hope for new audiences it leads them to discover this work. And then I hope for people like you and I who grew up with it and who've loved it for many years, it just brings you back to that place. I think that was what it was for me. I mean, it brought me back to a place that reminded me why I do what I do and why I love what I do. Because I think a lot of times when you're a filmmaker, the slog of it is very challenging. And especially we've been living in this really difficult time for independent film over the past 5 years, where there's been a lot of change in distribution. There's been a
Mhm.
lot less financial support than there has been in many, many years. Um, and I've lived through chapters like this in my career in the past. And anytime the way I've gotten through those periods is go make something you love. And
Love
that
that.
because even if you're not making a bunch of money, up front for something, it's not about the money. It's not about, oh, I don't know where this is going to end up getting distributed, but like I love making this thing every single day.
Hmm.
That is so much more important than dollars. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? And putting something out into the world that you care about. I mean, I think when you're in a time, which we are right now, especially in documentary, where a lot less documentaries are getting released than there were 5 years ago. There's a film that I produced, a beautiful film called Gaucho Gaucho, which won the special jury prize at Sundance in 2024. That film still has not received US distribution in a traditional way. We did some self-release things around awards, campaigning. 5 years ago, that never would have happened, right?
Right.
Like that, something that goes and wins an award at Sundance has a tough time finding distribution. So
Yeah.
that's the world that we're living in right now. And when you're living in that world, you got to just go make things you love and
Yep.
things you believe in. Because every time I've done that in my career, that shines through way more than, hey, I'm going to go chase this dollar or that dollar.
Nice. So that's great. And so now we're going to end with a couple of real fun questions that hopefully when people watch this, they're like, I want to know what these two are talking about, and I got to track this down.
Yeah.
Straight put, what's your favorite sketch? I know it's probably like picking a favorite child, but what's
Yeah,
your
it is.
favorite
It's a
sketch?
really difficult one, and I think I'd mentioned to you, I got asked this question on the red carpet, and on a red carpet, like I'm a behind the scenes guy. I'm not like a in front of the camera guy. Um, and so like yeah, I'd gotten asked this question, and I totally said hormones, which I think is a genius sketch, right?
Yeah.
Which I think is a
Yep.
genius. It's like one of the first sketches ever. It's just a genius sketch. And so I said probably Hormones is a pretty great sketch. But then I was like watching the movie and I'm like, Hormones is my favorite sketch. Like, no, Asides is my favorite sketch. Asides is I think Asides we talk about it's a sketch that Showalter wrote and kind of leads, but it's set in a high school and it's kind of like the character jumps in and out and does these asides. The characters kind of like they turn to camera, break the fourth wall, and and it's just genius. It's just like it's really just great, smart, different comedy. And I think Asides is my favorite sketch.
Okay.
Yeah.
For me, and I'm blanking the title, and I should have written it down, but because
Huh.
it became my favorite years later after working both in the fast food industry and in retail.
Oh
Chicken
yeah.
sandwich, Carl.
Chicken sandwich, Carl. Yeah, chicken sandwich, Carl. Oh, what was the name? I'm blanking on the name of this sketch. It might have just been called Carl.
It's just
Um,
called Carl.
it might just be called Carl. But
And it's
what I
also the same episode that had the famous write-in about
yeah.
writing in your letters to the
Oh
state.
yeah.
They're in the
One of
same
the
episode.
things that I will say, it's a fantastic episode. one of the things I'll say about that sketch, and I've always loved about that sketch, is that is like the state at its finest, right? Because one of the things I always thought that their sketches did so well is they just continue to level up. It's like just when you think it's over, we're going to throw
Right.
another hard joke at you. And just when we think that's over, we're going to throw another hard joke at you. And like uh Carl, which I believe we'll just call it Carl for right now. But 100% does that. Like when it's like, the manager comes out, and then it's like, oh no, it's the owner. Like it's literally
It's epic.
it's an epic sketch. That's a really good choice.
Um, so you are planning a dinner party for your nearest and dearest, Matthew,
Yes.
and you have one or potentially two chairs at the dinner table. Are you inviting Barry Lutz, Doug, Louie, or they come as a pair, Levon and Barry?
Ooh.
While he thinks, for those that don't know who I'm talking about, you'll
Okay.
get all of these characters.
I'm gonna say I'm gonna invite Barry and Levon just because Louis is just gonna dip his balls in everything. Uh
Fair.
Lots, and I got enough of it. I don't, you know what I mean? And then, but what I, and then Doug's gonna get out of there, man. He'll be out of there in a few minutes.
It's just
He'll
like,
be like,
I'm
here's some
out of
cool people. I'm out of here.
here.
Yeah. So, but Barry and Levon would stay the whole time
Mm,
and would probably have some very interesting conversational topics. And if
mm.
nothing else, it's a story everyone at the table would talk about for many years to come.
And one more, just given that in so many ways the state was ahead of its time with some of the issues that they tackled and so resonant to a lot what's going on now. If you had an opportunity there, so we know they were doing the tour, if you could pitch a sketch to them, what would it be about?
Ooh, I mean, I would love to see, and maybe not now, like not the state now, but I would
Mm-hmm.
love to see how the state circa 93
Mm-hmm.
contend with like the concept of social media and TikTok and
Oh,
you know what I mean?
yeah,
Because they were like punk rock, right? Like they were so kind of anti-establishment, and so much of that is like become our establishment in so many ways. Like this kind
right.
of like, I mean, there's some people who live their entire lives on social media, basically. Like, so I would love to see how the state in their prime, like the prime MTV era state, would tackle social media and like that.
Nice. So, what's next for Long Live the State? Do we know where it's going next?
Yeah, well, next, I mean, as in like immediate next, so like next week we are going to be playing the film at the Oak Cliff Film Festival in Dallas, Texas, which is a wonderful festival put together by a great group of people. And I'm really excited to share it with audiences there. We have a couple more festivals that we're in talks with for over the course of the rest of the summer and into the early fall. And we're meeting with distributors. I mean, a week ago at the premiere, I mean, that was the first time anyone had ever seen the movie. I
Right.
literally, when I say like, I literally finished it days before that. It was days before that. Um, so we'll see. I mean, this is one of those, pieces of the puzzle where that it takes a little time to figure it out. It's not like the old days. Like, when I first started getting into independent film and Sundance, you'd premiere your movie and 24 to 48 hours later, your deal was done. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, that was the norm. And I think kind of in a post-COVID world, it's just a little bit of a different timetable. So I would think sometime within the next month, we'll know what we're doing for distribution. And I would
Nice.
anticipate that the film will be coming out, whether it's on streaming or in theaters in some capacity later this year. We haven't we're sorting that out as we speak.
Well, for those of you watching this that are curious, be on the lookout for Long Live the State. If you are trying to figure out what we've been talking about here, or if you're a fan and wondering how can I see this, all episodes of The State are currently streaming on Paramount Plus, so you can check them out there. Matthew, thank you again so much for taking the time to chat with me today. This was a thrill. I loved your film. I can't wait to see it again. And for anyone, you can check out my 5-star spoiler free review on cinephilemike.com. So, Matthew, again, thank you so much for joining me today.
Mike, thank you so much for having me. Great talk and wish you the best.
Thanks. Same to you.
All right, bye.